Welcome to The Explainer. Today we are getting into something pretty intense. We're talking about the actual and honestly sometimes painful psychological friction it takes to abandon outdated engineering paradigms and adopt entirely new structural truths. It's this fascinating intersection where the literal architecture of our digital systems is just completely intertwined with the deeply ingrained cognitive frameworks in our own minds. And as we're going to see, changing the tech, well, that requires systematically breaking those legacy mental models. So, right off the bat, let's jump into this incredibly dramatic directive from the source documents. It frames the shift in data structures not just as a standard software update, but as a high-stakes ideological battle to purge a heresy. I mean, apostasy? That sounds like a crazy word for software documentation, right? But they literally treat this old, unanchored data metaphor as a betrayal, something that has to be completely eliminated if we ever want to achieve flawless physical automation. It's a massive recalibration of how we actually visualize digital truth. Section 1, the legacy mental model. To understand why this language is so visceral, we really have to examine the broken mental framework that has trapped developers for decades. For a long time, people visualize data as this bloated, upside-down tree, just kind of floating in the digital ether, completely reliant on chaotic, unpredictable command chains. It's exactly like setting up a massive game of dominoes. You know, a single delayed signal, an event fires twice, and boom, the whole sequence is totally ruined. That's event-driven chaos for you. But the new goal is deterministic elegance. Because if your goal is to reliably automate the physical world, you simply cannot float off in the ether. You need a system that is firmly anchored and mathematically verifiable. Section 2. The pain of cognitive restructuring. Now, you might be wondering, why is it so incredibly difficult for organizations to just let go of that chaotic legacy model, especially when the elegant solution is staring them right in the face? Well, breaking deeply ingrained mental models requires a brutal process called cognitive restructuring, mapped out here by the ACCI model. It illustrates a simple truth. Our foundational thoughts drive our emotions, which then dictate our behaviors and ultimately our consequences. So when a massive technological disruption hits, what do organizations do? They panic, and they just apply their broken legacy models harder. Actually, to break this cycle, we have to process the technical errors and the emotional frustration of change at the exact same time. It's not just learning a new code syntax, it's literally rebuilding your entire worldview from the ground up. Section 3. Purging the upside-down tree. To successfully execute this restructuring and truly purge that old floating tree, we have to completely change our relationship with time and productivity. You absolutely cannot achieve a paradigm shift while trapped in Chronos. That's the rigid, sequential sprint schedules and strict deadlines of modern project management. To innovate, you gotta embrace Kairos. This is that qualitative, unstructured time that actually gives your brain the temporal breathing room to actively forget obsolete routines. Chronos forces you to stay inside the box to meet the next deadline, whereas Kairos gives you the freedom to notice anomalies and make intuitive leaps. Without carving out periods of Kairos, our digital tools just turn into rigid external memories, totally bypassing our ability to genuinely innovate. Section 4. The power of active unbelief. This deliberate forgetting process brings us to a specific psychological tool that the sources argue is absolutely crucial for innovation. Unbelief here isn't a religious term at all. It is the rigorous unlearning of rigid legacy frameworks. Escaping traditional institutional logic is incredibly hard because it forces you into very strict established boxes. So active unbelief requires you to momentarily step entirely outside of that system. It's all about stripping away your institutional ties to securely bond around a completely new core premise. And it's really only through this intense unlearning that developers can construct borderless, mathematically pure architectures without dragging along the structural baggage of the past. Section 5. LIFO and ERC7827 architecture. Let's see how this cognitive shift actually meets the metal and builds into an elegant, deterministic solution that replaces the purged apostasy. This represents the new root-to-leaf architecture. Let's trace this beautiful flow. First, our data is securely anchored in the Cosmo, the global internet, as a definitive root hash. Then it crosses the semiotic bridge, where strict, formatted text compiles our fuzzy human intent into rigid, verifiable instructions. Finally, it travels down to the local environment, triggering concrete execution right at the extreme edge of the network on your physical hardware. We have fundamentally shifted the center of gravity away from massive, bloated cloud enclosures, directly down to the local leaf node. The ERC7827 protocol pragmatically transforms lightweight JSON text into a rigorous smart contract layer. Usually, JSON is just this lightweight format we use to zip text around the web, right? But here it introduces value, version control, it enables a flawless mathematical record of every single change, all while keeping everything totally human-readable. It functions almost exactly like a familiar REST API, which drastically lowers the barrier to entry for mainstream developers. And crucially, it's 100% backward compatible with the token standards we already use, making the transition totally seamless. The engine powering this entire protocol is the LIFO JSON state tree. Think of it like a highly efficient club bouncer who only needs to check the ID of the person standing directly in front of them. In a chaotic first-in, first-out setup, the system has to painstakingly scan massive, expensive transaction histories just to figure out the current state. But with last-in, first-out, that bouncer only looks at the absolute most recent entry. If the entry is valid, it synthesizes into the database. If there's a conflict, the bouncer violently rejects it. It's that strict logical function that prevents accidental overwrites and establishes true deterministic elegance. Section 6. Grounding digital truth. The crucial point here is how this last-in, first-out efficiency ultimately rewards us with absolute, undeniable digital truth. Because the very last item to go in is always the first item to come out, you unlock single-entry bookkeeping. You only ever have to query index 0 to get an immediate, flawless mathematical proof of the system's state. Think about how brilliant this is. You completely bypass the guesswork of traditional software. By checking just the top layer, index 0, you know immediately if a digital promise is open or closed. The state is either mathematically true or it isn't. No in-betweens. We have recreated the perfect tamper-proof seal digitally, establishing a firm forensic floor of truth. And this brilliantly illustrates the reality of the semiotic bridge. Deep down inside the hardware, the processor is completely blind to meaning. It's just a relentless metronome of clocked voltages. To cross the gaping physical chasm between our warm, associative minds and that freezing cold, unyielding silicon, we use the deterministic interface of text. We take rocks, we pump electrical currents, lightning through them, and we use highly structured text to force them to execute our intent out at the physical leaf nodes. Honestly, it's just incredible. As we wrap up this explainer, I really want to leave you with a final thought regarding your own mental models and the tools you choose to build the future. We've seen how escaping the apostasy of the floating upside-down tree requires real cognitive restructuring, active on-belief, and a fundamental shift to a grounded LIFO architecture. The semiotic bridge is fully built, and true deterministic execution is ready at the edge. So the only question is, will you settle for the passive, chaotic guessing of legacy systems, or will you embrace the cognitive friction, secure your own hardware, and take control as the sovereign pilot of your own reality? Keep questioning the architecture around you, and I will see you in the next explainer.